So good morning. Today we'll be doing our first laboratory simulation, which is how to use a micropipette. We'll be adding a tip. We'll be setting it to a specific volume. We'll be drawing up liquid by pressing the push button until it reaches the first stop, and expelling the liquid by pushing this push button until it reaches the second stop. Now for our materials, this is the materials we'll be using. Our red dye will be using micropipette. I will be using other equipment such as the bulletin paper and the trash bin. Now let's move on to our prediction. For this, I predict the size for the 20 microliters to be a little bit bigger than that of the 20 microliters. For the 50 microliters, I believe it will be slightly smaller than the 20 microliters. And for the 7.5 microliters, I believe it will be smaller than the 10 microliters. And for the 2 microliters, I believe it will be smaller than the 7 microliter one, as it is a very small amount of liquid. Now I move on to the next session, which is the protocol. Here we'll be conducting a simulation, which is to set the volume of the P20 micropipette, drop the red dye into the micropipette, pipette the red dye into the bulletin paper, and pipette different volumes of red dye into the bulletin paper. So now let's start off with the simulation, which is to select the P20 micropipette. As we select the volume, we change the volume up to 20 microliters as the instructions indicate. We save the volume, we select the tip box, we move the micropipette over, and we get a tip. We must close the P20 microtip. Now we select the red dye, we open the red dye, and we place the micropipette over it. Now we get liquid by pushing the push button until we reaches the first stop, and slowly releasing it. Now we move on to the we close the red dye, move on to the next set of instruction, which is to move the micropipette over the blotting paper, and we dispense the liquid by pressing the push button until it reaches the second stop. Slowly resetting. Now we move on to the trash bin. Here we eject the tip and we put the micropipette back into the rack. Now let's move on to the next set of instruction, which is in circle B on the blotting paper. Follow the same processes as before to dispense 50 microliters of red dye. And what you notice is that we have to do the same thing for a different volume, which is the first the 50 microliter, followed by the 7.5 microliter, and lastly the 2 microliter of red dye. So now we move on by moving the micropipette, resetting the volume to 15 microliters. Once we do that, we save it. We open the tip box. We get a tip. Close the tip box. Open the red dye, and we place the tip inside the red dye. And we get liquid by pushing the push button until it reaches the first stop and slowly releasing it. And we go back to the blotting paper and we release it by pushing the push button until it reaches the second stop. And once we do that, we eject the tip and we put it back into the rack and we set the volume back to a new volume, which is 7.5 microliters. And as you could notice, the red number at the bottom is red, which indicates it is a decimal. So we save the volume, open the tip box, we get another tip, close this, open the red dye, we get more red dye, pushing it to the first push button, releasing it, we close the red dye, and we release the liquid by pushing until it reaches the second stop. We release this, we eject the tip, put it back to the rack, we set the volume back to 2 microliters, which is the least amount you could take. Now open the next, we open the tip box again, get another tip, close the tip, place it back into the red dye, and we get liquid by pushing it into until the push button reaches the first stop. Slowly release it. Oh my bad, I have to open the red dye. There you go. We push it until it reaches the first stop so we can get the liquid inside. Slowly release it. Close the red dye and release the liquid till the push button reaches the second stop. And slowly release it, and then we just eject the tip, and we place back the P20 micropipette back into the rock. And we have finished the lab. Now we move on to the results, which is this is my predicted results, and these are the actual results, which I got them correct, and these is the ideal results, which seem just like the ones I predicted. Now we move on to the next section, which is the reflection. So we'll be answering some questions. What do you think is the main purpose of the simulation? It is to learn the correct way to handle a micropipette in the laboratory. Second question, why is it important to push the plunger to the first stop when drying up liquid? Because if we go to the second stop, we'll measure too much liquid. Got that correct. If the window on the P20 micropipette displays the number 1555 from the top to the bottom, what volume will be measured? I believe it is 15.5 microliters. The last question, I believe the last question, what is the main purpose of disposal of the tips of the micropipette? And this is to, I believe, to prevent cross-contamination between samples, and I also got that correct. Now for the feedback, I feel very confident and like that I could do this, replicate this lab in a real lab setting. Next section, this is a summary, and that was the lab for today. Thank you very much.